The bitter wind bit into Emily Harper's skin like icy needles, slicing through her worn coat as she stood in front of the ramshackle cabin she'd once called home. Behind her, two small children clung desperately to her skirt. Jacob, her 9-year-old son, gritted his teeth, stubbornly refusing to cry. Beside him, Sarah, barely 6, whimpered softly, clutching her doll tighter, her tiny fingers white with cold. The sun was dipping behind the snow-capped mountains, casting ominous shadows across the barren land. Emily glanced back one last time, catching the glint of contempt in the eyes of her late husband's family as they stood silently watching from the porch. Once they had welcomed her, once they had called her daughter. But when Henry had died from fever just days before, their compassion quickly turned to disdain. A widow was useless, 2 hungry children an unbearable burden. The door slammed shut, echoing harshly in the emptiness, the cruel finality of it stinging worse than the freezing air. Emily's heart clenched painfully, but she steeled herself against the wave of despair. She had no time to mourn. Survival was her only concern now. "Mama, I'm cold," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Emily knelt, gently pulling the frayed shawl tighter around her daughter. "We'll find shelter soon, sweetheart," she promised, forcing warmth into her voice she didn't feel. Jacob watched silently, his small fist clenched tightly at his sides. "Let's go," Emily said softly, taking each child by the hand. They stepped onto the frozen trail, the crunching snow beneath their feet a lonely sound in the approaching twilight. Darkness descended rapidly, the temperature dropping sharply. Emily knew they wouldn't survive the night without shelter. Panic tightened her chest, but she pushed forward, scanning the horizon desperately. She remembered Henry mentioning an old trapper's cabin up in the hills, abandoned but still intact. It was their only hope. The moon rose, pale and indifferent, illuminating their path through twisted pines and sharp rocks. Jacob stumbled, nearly falling to his knees, exhaustion evident on his face. Emily paused, helping him upright, her voice gentle. "Not much further, Jake. Just hold on a little longer." He nodded grimly, determination hardening his young features. Emily felt a pang of pride mixed with sorrow. No child should have to endure this. Finally nestled among towering evergreens, the cabin appeared, a dark shape barely visible in the faint moonlight. Relief surged through Emily, giving her renewed strength. They hurried forward, pushing open the creaking door. Inside, the air was stale, musty with neglect, but at least it shielded them from the biting wind. Emily quickly moved to the fireplace, her hands trembling as she pulled flint and steel from her small satchel. Jacob gathered scraps of wood from the corners of the room, silently placing them beside her. After several desperate attempts, sparks caught, and soon flames crackled softly, casting weak light and warmth into the oppressive gloom. Sarah curled near the hearth, eyes heavy with exhaustion, her tiny body shivering despite the growing fire. Jacob watched his sister protectively, the tension never leaving his young shoulders. Emily searched the cabin, heart sinking as she found little more than empty crates and dusty, forgotten furniture. A broken stool, an empty barrel, and some scraps of moldy fabric. No food. Desperation clawed at her stomach, but she forced it down. Tomorrow, she promised herself, they would hunt, forage, anything to survive. A sudden noise outside made her freeze. A low growl, primal and threatening. Emily's blood ran cold. Jacob's eyes widened and Sarah whimpered in her sleep. Slowly, Emily picked up a rusted hatchet from the corner, gripping it tightly. The cabin door rattled as the wind blew harder, masking the sounds of something approaching. Then silence. Seconds passed like hours. Emily's breath shallow, her pulse hammering painfully in her ears. Just as she started to hope she had imagined the sound, it came again, closer this time. A deep, menacing growl. "Stay quiet," she whispered urgently to Jacob, whose gaze never left the door. Another growl followed by scratching at the wood, claws digging, testing. Emily positioned herself protectively in front of her children, hatchet raised, her knuckles white from gripping it so tightly. The door creaked, shifting slightly on its rusty hinges. Emily's heart raced as the shadow of a large animal filled the doorway. A wolf, eyes glowing amber in the firelight, its fur dusted with snow. Her muscles tensed, ready to strike if the beast lunged. The wolf stepped slowly inside, nose sniffing the air, eyes fixed on her. Time seemed to slow as Emily braced herself, but the wolf didn't attack. Instead, it paused, studying her curiously, almost thoughtfully. Emily held its gaze, her breathing shallow, terrified to move. Finally, with an almost dismissive snort, the creature turned and padded silently back into the night. Emily sank to the floor, her legs shaking uncontrollably. Jacob moved closer, eyes wide with fear and awe. "Mama." "We're okay," she whispered, hugging him close. "We're safe now." Sleep didn't come easy that night, with every creak and rustle causing her heart to leap painfully. But as dawn broke, painting the sky in soft shades of lavender and gold, Emily felt a fragile sense of hope. They were alive, and as long as they were alive, there was a chance. Then a shadow blocked the doorway, tall and silent. A man stood there, his silhouette stark against the brightening horizon. Fear surged anew, adrenaline flooding her veins. "Who are you?" Emily demanded, her voice steadier than she felt, gripping the hatchet again. The stranger didn't move, his features obscured by the morning glare. He seemed to consider her carefully, silently. Then slowly, he raised his hands, palms open in a gesture of peace. "My name's Caleb," he said quietly, his voice deep and calm. "And I'm not here to hurt you." Emily stared at him, wary but desperate. She knew she couldn't trust anyone, especially a stranger in these unforgiving lands. Yet something in his voice, a quiet sincerity, gave her pause. "What do you want?" she asked cautiously, heart thudding painfully in her chest. Caleb stepped forward slightly, his gaze steady, unwavering. "I saw your smoke," he said gently. "You won't survive out here alone. Let me help you." Emily hesitated, her heart torn between distrust and desperation. She glanced back at her children, still sleeping, oblivious to the stranger's presence. She swallowed hard, meeting his eyes once more. "Why should I trust you?" she whispered. Caleb's expression softened slightly. "Because out here, trust might be the only thing that keeps you alive." Caleb's presence filled the small cabin with a calm yet powerful energy. Emily's heart still raced as she studied the stranger standing quietly by the door, silhouetted by the rising sun. His eyes were steady, carrying an unspoken strength that stirred both caution and curiosity within her. "Why would you help us?" Emily finally asked, breaking the tense silence. She kept a tight grip on the hatchet, her fingers aching from the strain. Caleb stepped closer, slowly, deliberately showing his empty hands again. "Because someone once helped me," he replied quietly. "Out here, kindness is rare, but necessary." Emily hesitated, her thoughts racing. Trust was something she'd learned to guard carefully, a precious resource easily shattered. She glanced back at her children, their small bodies curled peacefully under tattered blankets. Jacob stirred slightly, eyes fluttering open. "Who's he?" Jacob asked sleepily, pushing himself upright and regarding Caleb warily. Emily forced a reassuring smile. "His name's Caleb. He says he wants to help." Caleb met Jacob's gaze directly, his expression gentle yet firm. "Morning, son. Looks like you've had a rough time. Hungry?" Jacob hesitated, looking uncertainly to his mother. At Emily's cautious nod, Caleb slowly reached into his leather satchel, pulling out a small wrapped bundle. He placed it carefully on the floor between them. "Some dried meat and bread," Caleb said softly. "It's not much, but it'll help." Jacob stared hungrily, then glanced again at his mother. Emily's stomach clenched painfully, reminding her how long it had been since they'd eaten. Pride warred with practicality, and finally she nodded slowly. "Thank you." Caleb stepped back, giving them space as Emily carefully divided the food among her children. Sarah awoke, rubbing sleep from her eyes, confusion quickly replaced by cautious delight at the sight of food. Caleb observed silently, his quiet demeanor easing some of Emily's initial suspicion. "How did you find us?" Emily asked quietly, once the children were occupied with their meal. "Your fire," Caleb responded simply. He glanced at the modest blaze in the hearth. "Smoke travels far on a clear night. You're lucky I was nearby and not someone else." Emily shivered, the implication clear. She knew the wilderness was filled with far worse dangers than wolves. Outlaws roamed freely, preying on anyone unfortunate enough to cross their paths. Caleb studied her quietly for a moment, then spoke again. "You have somewhere safe to go?" Emily shook her head slowly. "Number, not anymore." The admission was painful, a stark acknowledgement of her vulnerability. "We've got nowhere." Caleb's eyes softened. "There's a settlement, Westbridge, 2 days' travel from here. It's small, but it has good people. I was heading there myself." Emily felt hope flutter dangerously in her chest. A community, a chance at safety and stability for her children was more than she'd dared to dream. Yet skepticism lingered stubbornly. "Why should I trust you?" she repeated softly, meeting his eyes. Caleb took a slow breath, his gaze unwavering. "You shouldn't. Not blindly. But sometimes survival demands risks. You don't have to trust me fully, just enough to get there safely." His honesty struck a chord. Emily glanced at Jacob, whose guarded expression had softened slightly as he ate. Sarah, oblivious to their conversation, nibbled happily, the first smile Emily had seen on her face in days. Finally, Emily exhaled slowly, releasing the tight grip on the hatchet. "All right, we'll go with you." Caleb nodded, a brief smile touching his lips. "Good. We leave within the hour. Gather what little you have." The journey began soon after, the air crisp with frost as they stepped into the pale morning sunlight. Emily kept her children close, her eyes continuously scanning the horizon. Caleb moved confidently ahead, his footsteps sure and quiet. As the hours passed, Emily found her initial fear easing. Caleb's quiet presence provided an odd comfort, though she remained alert. Jacob walked closely beside Caleb, his young eyes sharp, watching the man's movements and mimicking his careful steps. By midday, they rested briefly beside a partially frozen creek. Caleb filled his flask, offering Emily a drink first. She accepted cautiously, the cold water refreshing and crisp. "Where are you from?" Emily asked, curiosity overcoming caution. Caleb paused briefly, his gaze distant. "Far from here. Lost everything during the war." His voice was quiet, burdened by memories. "Been wandering ever since." Emily nodded silently, understanding the weight behind those words. Loss was a familiar companion, relentless and exhausting. Yet Caleb bore it differently. With quiet dignity she found herself admiring. By late afternoon, the sky darkened ominously, thick clouds rolling in swiftly from the north. Caleb's pace quickened, urgency evident in his movements. "Storm's coming. We need shelter." Emily's anxiety spiked as snow began to fall softly around them, gentle flakes quickly turning fierce and heavy. The world around them blurred white, visibility dropping rapidly. "There!" Caleb called, pointing to a shallow cave in the rocky hillside ahead. They hurried forward, snow thickening around them, stinging their faces. Inside the cave, Emily quickly gathered her children, wrapping them tightly in blankets. Caleb expertly built a fire, flames flickering to life, casting comforting warmth and light into the darkness. As they settled around the fire, Caleb met Emily's gaze seriously. "Storm could trap us here a while. We need to ration carefully." Emily nodded gravely, her mind racing with worries. Despite the storm and uncertainty, the quiet strength in Caleb's presence brought her unexpected reassurance. As night deepened and the wind howled fiercely outside, she found herself daring to hope. Caleb watched the entrance silently, eyes sharp, alert. Emily studied his profile in the flickering firelight, a question lingering unspoken between them. Finally, she spoke softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want from us, Caleb?" He turned, meeting her eyes directly, sincerity evident in his steady gaze. "Nothing more than to see you safely to Westbridge. After that, your path is your own." Emily nodded, relaxing slightly. For now, that simple promise was enough. The storm raged relentlessly outside the cave, the wind screaming like an angry spirit, clawing at the rocky walls. Inside, Emily sat close to the fire, her children sleeping restlessly beside her. Caleb remained by the cave's entrance, watchful, his silhouette outlined by the flickering flames. Sleep evaded Emily, her thoughts swirling. She studied Caleb quietly, curiosity and caution intertwining within her heart. His stoic silence and guarded history intrigued her. Unable to suppress her curiosity any longer, she spoke softly into the quiet. "What happened during the war?" she asked hesitantly, her voice barely audible over the storm. Caleb didn't answer immediately. He continued staring into the darkness, his jaw tight. After a moment, he turned slowly toward her, his eyes heavy with memories. "I fought," he began quietly. "Saw things no man should see. Lost friends, family, everything. War leaves no one untouched." Emily recognized the pain in his voice, the same ache that haunted her own heart. Her expression softened as she nodded gently. "I'm sorry. Loss is a cruel companion." Caleb's gaze met hers, and for the first time, Emily saw the deep vulnerability behind his quiet strength. "After the war, I wandered, trying to outrun memories. Helping others became my redemption." A long silence stretched between them, filled with shared understanding and quiet respect. Emily finally broke the silence, her voice gentle yet firm. "You don't have to carry your burdens alone, Caleb." His gaze softened slightly, gratitude flickering briefly before he turned away again, resuming his silent vigil. By morning the storm had eased, leaving behind a pristine blanket of white, stretching endlessly under the pale, cold sunlight. They emerged from the cave cautiously, the chill biting sharply despite the calm air. "We need to move," Caleb said firmly, scanning their surroundings. "It's not safe here anymore. Storms draw desperate people." Emily gathered her children swiftly, each step through the snow draining their strength, but fueled by determination. Jacob walked steadily beside Caleb, a newfound respect evident in his young eyes. As midday approached, they came across the remnants of an abandoned wagon, half buried beneath snow and ice. Caleb paused, cautious yet curious. "Stay here," he instructed firmly, moving forward to investigate. Emily's heart raced anxiously as Caleb rummaged through the wreckage. Moments later, he returned, his expression grave. "Raiders. This happened recently. We need to be careful." Fear tightened Emily's chest, memories of whispered horror stories about raider gangs resurfacing. Caleb saw her anxiety and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll stay vigilant. Trust me." She nodded slowly, swallowing the fear that rose in her throat. They continued onward, tension heavy in the air, every rustle or snap of a branch amplifying their unease. As dusk approached, Caleb spotted smoke curling upward beyond the next ridge. He halted abruptly, signaling Emily and the children to remain quiet. Cautiously, he climbed the ridge, disappearing briefly before returning swiftly, his expression hard. "Raiders camped ahead," he whispered urgently. "Too many to confront. We'll have to go around them." Emily's pulse quickened. "How much further will that take us?" Caleb's jaw tightened grimly. "Another day at least." She exhaled sharply, dread settling heavily on her shoulders. Her children were exhausted, but staying wasn't an option. "Lead the way," she whispered determinedly. Caleb guided them carefully through a dense thicket, the darkness deepening as the night fell around them. The forest closed in, claustrophobic and ominous. Sarah clung tighter to Emily, whimpering softly, her small body trembling with fatigue and fear. Suddenly, harsh voices shattered the silence, echoing sharply nearby. Caleb raised his hand quickly, signaling them to hide. They crouched low behind dense bushes, hearts pounding painfully. Emily held her breath, clutching her children desperately as heavy footsteps approached. Two men appeared, rough and ragged, their voices loud and crude. "They can't have gone far. Keep looking," one barked angrily. Emily's blood froze. Caleb silently drew his revolver, eyes narrowed dangerously. He glanced back at Emily, holding her gaze steadily, silently communicating the seriousness of their predicament. The men lingered briefly, scanning the shadows with narrowed eyes before moving onward, their voices fading into the distance. Caleb released a tense breath, lowering his weapon slowly. "We have to move fast," he whispered urgently. "They're hunting someone, and they might find us instead." They moved swiftly, adrenaline driving them forward despite their exhaustion. Caleb's steps were deliberate, ensuring they left minimal tracks. Hours passed, blurring together until finally, the faint glow of dawn painted the horizon. Caleb halted, scanning carefully. "We can rest briefly," he said quietly, indicating a sheltered hollow beneath thick trees. Emily settled her children down gently, exhaustion evident on their faces. As they slept, she turned toward Caleb, her voice quiet but resolute. "Thank you. For everything. We'd be lost without you." He met her gaze, something unreadable shifting in his expression. "I told you I'd get you to safety. I keep my promises." Emily studied him thoughtfully, a fragile trust beginning to solidify within her. "And after Westbridge, what happens to you?" Caleb looked away, staring into the distance, his voice distant yet firm. "My journey continues. There are always others who need help." Her heart clenched at the thought of parting ways, though she wasn't sure why. She reached out gently, touching his arm briefly. "You deserve peace too, Caleb. Helping others doesn't mean you can't allow someone to help you." He met her eyes again, a faint, genuine smile softening his rugged features. "Maybe someday," he murmured quietly. For the first time since their harrowing journey began, Emily allowed herself to feel genuine hope, not just for her children's safety, but perhaps even for Caleb's redemption and the possibility of finding solace in a harsh, unforgiving world. The morning broke clear and bright, the first warm rays of sunlight spilling gently through the trees, illuminating the quiet hollow where they had rested. Emily opened her eyes slowly, the sounds of the waking forest soothing yet unfamiliar. Caleb stood watchful nearby, his expression calm yet alert. "Morning," Emily greeted softly, sitting up and brushing stray leaves from her skirt. Jacob and Sarah still slept soundly beside her, their faces relaxed and peaceful. "Morning," Caleb replied, his voice steady. "We should reach Westbridge by midday. Are you ready?" Emily nodded, a mix of relief and apprehension filling her chest. The promise of safety and community lay within reach, but the uncertainty of what lay ahead still weighed heavily upon her. Caleb seemed to read her thoughts, offering a reassuring nod. "You'll be safe there," he affirmed. "Good people live in Westbridge." With quiet efficiency, they packed their few belongings and began the final leg of their journey. Jacob walked confidently beside Caleb, pride evident in his young stride. Sarah held tightly onto Emily's hand, glancing up at her mother occasionally, seeking comfort in her gentle smile. As the sun climbed higher, the landscape gradually transformed, rugged wilderness giving way to cultivated fields and scattered homesteads. A sense of cautious optimism began to bloom within Emily's heart. When the town finally appeared in the distance, nestled snugly among rolling hills, Emily felt tears prickle at the corners of her eyes. Tears of relief, gratitude, and quiet joy. Caleb glanced at her briefly, understanding evident in his gaze. Westbridge was modest yet vibrant, the streets bustling with life as townsfolk moved purposefully about their daily tasks. Caleb guided them toward the center, stopping before a tidy wooden building marked General Store. "Wait here," Caleb instructed gently, stepping inside. Moments later, he returned accompanied by a stout, kindly-looking woman whose eyes sparkled warmly at the sight of them. "Emily, this is Martha Simmons," Caleb introduced gently. "She'll help you settle in." Martha approached warmly, extending a comforting hand to Emily. "You're safe now, dear," she said gently. "We'll get you and these little ones fed and rested." Emily's throat tightened with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. As Martha led them away, Emily paused, turning back toward Caleb. Her eyes searched his face, emotions tangled within her chest. "Will you stay?" she asked hesitantly, already knowing his answer but compelled to ask regardless. Caleb's expression softened, regret flickering briefly across his features. "I can't," he replied quietly. "My path continues elsewhere. But you're safe now. That's what matters." Emily nodded slowly, swallowing the bittersweet ache his words evoked. "If you ever pass this way again—" "I will," Caleb promised, sincerity ringing clear in his voice. "I'd like that." With a final, gentle nod, Caleb turned, walking slowly away from them, his broad shoulders soon lost among the townsfolk. Emily watched him until he disappeared completely, a quiet sadness mingled with profound gratitude filling her heart. Weeks passed, and Emily slowly rebuilt her life in Westbridge. Martha offered her employment in the general store, providing steady work and the warmth of companionship. Jacob quickly adapted, helping around town and making new friends, his confidence growing daily. Sarah regained her cheerful disposition, playing freely in the safety of their new home. Yet Caleb's absence lingered. Emily found herself often glancing toward the horizon, hoping to catch a glimpse of him returning. His quiet strength and unwavering kindness had left a permanent mark upon her heart. One evening, as the sun dipped low, casting a golden glow over Westbridge, Emily sat quietly on the porch, watching her children play. Footsteps approached, steady and familiar. Her heart leaped, and she turned swiftly, breath catching. Caleb stood at the gate, a gentle smile curving his lips, his eyes warm and welcoming. "You came back," Emily breathed, rising to her feet, her heart pounding joyously. He nodded slowly, stepping closer. "I realized my path wasn't elsewhere. It was here with you, if you'll have me." Emily stepped toward him, eyes shining with unshed tears, her voice steady and sure. "Yes, Caleb, always." As twilight enveloped the quiet town of Westbridge, two souls scarred by loss and strengthened by perseverance stood together, united by trust, hope, and the promise of a new beginning.